Welcome to Lesson 5, For Loops, Topic 2. In this video, we're going to explore how we can use some of our components on the Circuit Playground Express to control the for loop, and then see how we can affect the NeoPixels with that control of using the buttons. So let's get to it. So as a little motivation, and let me pull this back up, as to what we're going to do, again, the code that's here is not the code that's on the Circuit Playground Express right now. What we want to be able to do is that when I press on the right button, I start to turn on the NeoPixels. So let me show you that. So as long as I hold the right button, the number of NeoPixels turn on. Now if I hold the left button, the number of NeoPixels turn down. And you can easily, hopefully, imagine applications of this. Maybe not directly of, turning on NeoPixels, but just this concept that if you press a button, something increases, and that increase is directly related to some other output. For instance, think of the volume button on your remote control. You press the plus button, the number of the volume level increase, which also increases your output, the speaker. All right, we're not going to play around with the speaker in this video. We're going to do the lights, but it's the same concept. So let's see how we can use buttons to control how much is done. All right, so just as a quick review of what we've done in the previous video, we can use the for loop to control the number of NeoPixels that turn on. Now in this case, we're going to start at NeoPixel 0 because I starts at 0, and we're using I for the position, and we're going to end up at 9 because 9 is the last value that's less than 10, and we're increasing by 1 each time. So we're going to get the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9. So let me run this just as review, and let me show you on the Circuit Playground Express. Boom, we got all the lights. But the thing is, we don't want all the lights. We want the number of lights to be dependent on how long or how many times the buttons are pressed. So because we're talking about buttons, well, that means we have to create some variables. So let's create a variable for the left button, the right button. And, well, let's start off with that. We'll take baby steps. And we need to assign them values. So we're going to do Circuit Playground left button to assign the left button some value. And now let's do the same thing for the right button. And again, and this is something you should get comfortable with, that when you look at a scenario and you're being asked to work with this particular component, you know what? Create a variable for that component, and the very first thing you do in the loop is to retrieve its value in the loop so that we can constantly retrieve it. Now let's see how we're going to integrate the idea of the buttons, and let me not make this logical mistake here, just spotted it. Integrate the buttons with the control of the for loop. Now right now we're getting all the NeoPixels to turn on. Well, that's because we have the value 10 here. 10 is 10. 10's not changing. But if we were to change this to 8, then we would only get 8 NeoPixels. If we would change this to 6, we would only get 6 NeoPixels. If we change this to 2, we would only get 2 NeoPixels. So somehow we need something here that has the ability to change. Obviously, it can't be a hard number. So if you're thinking variables, you are correct. So let's create another variable, last, and let's start off at 0. And let's put that here. So I'm going to run the program. Now, it might not be too exciting, but it is going to prove a point though. Okay, so I don't have any syntax errors, and I don't have any lights on. Because let's look at what's happening here. I is starting at 0. I less than last. But what is the value of last? It is 0. Is 0 less than 0? It's not. So this is not an error. This is intentional. It means the for loop doesn't run. So this variable last is now controlling. So I'm going to manually change this. I'm going to change this to 1. And what you'll see now is that 1 neopixel turns on. So by using a variable here, we are able to change which neopixels get turned on. And again, I mean, I could go through this. Let's do one more, just to reemphasize the idea that the variable can change. And the changing of that variable will control how many neopixels get turned on. And there you go. You got 5. So hopefully you can start seeing the connection. We got buttons, and we have a variable that needs to get changed when we press those buttons. So how are we going to do that? Well, let me say it a different way. So if the person presses the right button, for instance, we want to increase that last position. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. So if the person, the user, presses the right button, which we're checking for it to be equal to 1, we want to increase the last position. So let's do that. And for this, I'm also going to do a serial print line of that last variable. Because again, I need you to see that connection between the last variable being used for the for loop and that last variable being modified by when we press the right button. Oh, that's because I don't want to start at 5. Let's run it again. I wanted to start it at 0. Stay the output here. Pull up the camera. All right, so you can see here the value of last is 0, which means we're not getting any neopixels. Now I'm going to press the right button. Notice how the variable last now becomes 1. And because it becomes 1, the for loop has a value of 1 here, which means we won't turn on 1 neopixel. I press 2 of them. Now you can see here in the serial monitor, I'm changing the value of last. And as I change the value of last, I'm getting more neopixels. Why? Because that variable last is being used as part of that condition. So now we're almost done. We want to do the opposite. We want to be able to do it so when I press the left button, we get less lights. All right, so that's a very similar process. So if LB is equal to 1, means we're checking to see if the person pressed the left button. What do we want to do to that last variable so that we see less neopixels? Well, hopefully you're thinking, well, if we press the right button, we want to see more. That's a plus plus. If you want to see less, when we press the left button, that's a minus minus. And let's run that. All right, so you can see here we start at 0. If I press the right button, we're getting the numbers to increase. It's at 8 right now, it stays at 8. And then when I press the left button, it decreases and I see less of them. So you can see there that the number in the serial monitor is decreasing. That's the variable last. And that is controlling how many neopixels we're seeing. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. Let's review what we've done. So in this lesson 5, for loops, we saw how we can use buttons in conjunction with a variable to control how often the for loop runs. Again, this is another common thing to do with for loops, to have some external information control how much the for loop runs. All right, so hopefully you're excited that you can now do some cool things with the neopixels that are interactive. So I look forward to seeing what you can do. Enjoy.